Hi, I'm Sully and I'm making 3D pixel art models for my upcoming game. Last time I made this test tube. This time I'm making a container to hold a parasite. Up to this point I've been creating the model first, then the texture. But this time I did the opposite and completely changed my process. Instead of visualizing the model, I tried to visualize it flat into pixels first. I started with the most important face that required the most amount of detail, which would be the top of the container. First, I started to make a texture just to get the scaling and the necessary detail down. So I created this draft texture right here and attached it to a plane here in Blender. So you'll see this is what it looks like in the image editor in Blender. So that enables me to now make a really simple version of the model. The top sides are much easier because I just made it one-to-one with the texture. So every box here, every unit in Blender is actually a pixel. And so that made making this cylinder very, very simple. And yes, you may have noticed it is brighter than the sun white. And that is because if you want your textures to show up in solid mode, you go to viewport shading and you make it flat. And then you make the color texture. It's usually on material. So that's why everything looks white. So after creating the model, I attached the image to the material of the object and boom, a really ugly container. So now I just need to fix up the texture because this doesn't look quite right. And it also doesn't match the test tube at all. But the good news is now I know the size is all figured out and adjusting it won't take a bunch of refactoring. So I can actually just hide this image texture and just work on this object and the texture. So next, after an update of the texture, you'll notice that we went from this to this, which looks a lot better. Ignore this for now. It'll make sense later. So now this is what our updated container looks like. Now I made a lot of changes here, so let me go through them real quick. So first of all, I added these small gray opaque parts to the actual glass of the container. I also added a few planes like the handle at the top up here and these cables. I'm super happy with how these little planes added to the look. I think it's important not to rely too heavily on them because then you kind of lose the pixel art look and it just kind of becomes all flat billboardy. Also, I could have been pixel perfect with the angled parts of this cable, but I actually really like the tiny imperfections. It kind of breaks up the pixel workflow in a satisfying way. So finally, here is the final model and texture. So you'll notice I moved the cables up here. It originally was coming out of this little box here, but with the handle, it just felt a little too busy up here. So I moved them down to the sides. I think with the different sizes and it connecting to the side, it makes a little bit more sense, but I also just frees up this top so that it's a nice looking handle. And finally, I added this little specimen or parasite, which kind of floats in the middle here with the glass being transparent. And in the turntable, at the beginning of the video, the turntable that I showed you, it actually follows the camera, which is pretty cool. So something I haven't mentioned yet that you may have noticed is the glass. Now this is a different technique than I used in the test tube video because it's actually transparent. It's not just the back of the planes using reverse normals. I actually used a different technique. So these specific faces have their own material. And that material, if you go down to Viewport Display, is actually half alpha. So you'll notice if I make it 1, it's all opaque, of course. So this probably won't export, but I do have an idea of how to keep this look with a baked opacity or an alpha matte without having to refactor much. So I plan to share this as a little written devlog on my Ko-fi page once I figure it out. So check the link to my page in the description if that sounds interesting. I'm excited to see how all these models I'm making work together. I actually didn't show you, but I did use the test tube as a reference. So you can see kind of the size difference, which I think is pretty satisfying. And it just makes it so that they fit in the same world and don't look really inconsistent. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed the video or learned something, please consider leaving a like or a comment. Also, if you want to see more pixel textured sci-fi model breakdowns like this, maybe consider subscribing. I try to share my process and the lessons I learn along the way, so hopefully my mistakes can save you some trouble. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.